Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Today was an absolutely wild day in the courtroom for the Brooks Houck trial. Brooks Houck and Joey Lawson are on trial in connection with the murder of Crystal Rogers. Crystal was the girlfriend of Brooks Houck, and in 2015, on July 3rd, she was last seen. She disappeared, is presumed dead. She has never been seen since July 3rd. Brooks Houck was the last person to see her. Today, I've been in the courtroom all week, bringing this to you live directly from the courtroom. Today felt very, very different. The prosecution rested, for one thing. We had 11 witnesses, and then the prosecution rested. Today, we heard testimony about a cadaver dog named Ranger. Ranger was not there. He passed on, but his handler was there to talk about what Ranger had found. We heard secret recordings that the Houck family made before they went into the grand jury room or afterwards. And then we heard about fistfights. We heard about threats. We heard about confessions, heavy machinery running at night on a remote lot the very night that Crystal Rogers disappeared. And then a huge one, as we've been covering it in the trial, Joey Lawson is back in the case. He's actually in the case. There was evidence about Joey Lawson today, not from wildly discredited witnesses. So the witnesses tied him in. It was pretty clear this time that there's at least evidence. The jury can believe it or not believe it, but the state has at least presented some evidence. So today, it felt like for the first time in several days that the Commonwealth had real momentum. Both defendants moved for a directed verdict, and the judge gave, as I would expect, a pretty quick and fast no. And it was a strong no in the case of Brooks Houck. He listed, I'm guessing, 30 or 40 different facts that would make it reasonable for him to refuse to do that and for the jury to convict Brooks Houck. There was a smaller set against Joey Lawson. They're both staying in the case. This case will go to the jury, or at least, absent some kind of post-defense motion. So tomorrow, the defense case starts. We are a matter of days away from a final decision by a jury as to whether or not Brooks Houck should be convicted, whether or not Joey Lawson should be convicted in connection with the disappearance and the murder of Crystal Rogers. So let's dive into what happened today and how it's going to affect the jury's decision. Before we do, would you mind hitting the like button? That'll really help us get the video out. And if you aren't subscribed, please do. We would love to have you back for more. First 5 in the chat tonight, special welcome to you, Just a Girl, Susan Moore, Neuropsych Zena, Michelle Dunn, and Camilla Juliana. So let's start off with, I also want to give a special shout out to some people I saw today, Donna and Roger, Connie and Marcia. And special shout out to all of you. Let's start off with the first witness of the day. It was a witness who was actually recalled from another day. They had some trouble with the audio, and so they brought him back in so they could allow him to finish up his testimony. His name is Tim O'Daniel, and he's a detective. He went through some of the cell phone data, and he had been asked to locate Joey Lawson's phone in an AT&T cell phone dump. And what had happened was calls from Joey were showing up in the call detail, but they weren't showing up in the tower dump. So he said, that's because you lose data after 7 days to a month. And all of that was a little murky. And I thought it was pretty funny when the defense lawyer stood up and he said, I'm not going to pretend to say I understood everything you just said, but, and let's get down to it, you had a subpoena that you put out for the Joey Lawson records from T-Mobile, and there were no records. And the answer was, yes, that's correct. Joey also had some cross on this. Normally, his lawyers let Brooks Houck's lawyers handle it. They kind of got it all done. But this time Joey did say, really, you're supposed to ask for these things early on, right? Kind of dug the knife in a little bit on that. Next witness, super interesting. I learned a lot about canine dog handling, cadaver hunting, and not hunting, that's not the right word. It's called human remains, and they have human remains training for dogs. I knew nothing about this, but the witness, Terry Benjamin, is from Texas. He is a canine dog handler, has a volunteer group that does canine search and rescue. He's a former fighter pilot, lots of different various careers, including being a police officer and working in search and rescue for a lot of years. So Ranger the dog was his partner at this time. Ranger has passed on. He now has Cowboy the dog, but Ranger at the time was the one involved in this case. You remember yesterday we talked about the white Buick that belonged to Anna Whiteside. She's the grandmother of Brooks Houck. And I know if you're just coming in this case, you're like, whoa, where are we? This is so confusing. So Brooks Houck, again, has been accused of murdering Crystal Rogers. And how did it happen? It's hard to know because of the fact that there's no body. So one of the things that actually that they are trying to do is put together a circumstantial evidence case. One of the things that was ultra strange that we've heard testimony about is the very night that Crystal Rogers, according to her boyfriend Brooks Houck, was at the Houck family farm and supposedly went back home with Brooks, although that's now in serious doubt. But that very night in the adjoining property, there were coon hunters out. They were doing a coon hunting competition. And they testified that as they're walking down this road going through the property where they've been given permission to go hunting, that they find a white car just sitting in the middle of the road on this country road. It's not even really a road because it's more like a driveway. It's on private property. So just back in the woods, they find this car. And that's really strange. And when Crystal goes missing, ultimately this comes around. They tell the police this, and everybody begins to look for the white Buick. So there's lots of strange stuff around this white Buick. First of all, that it was there at all. Secondly, it turns out that Brooks Houck's grandmother had a white Buick, which might fit the description of the vehicle that was parked there in the middle of the road in the middle of the night. And how we know this is that about a year later, the father of Crystal Rogers posted on Facebook saying, hey, we've got some information about this white Buick. Does anybody know of a white Buick? Let us know. We're busy looking for Crystal. That was posted on Facebook. And within about 4 days of that, law enforcement went and got a search warrant to look at Anna Whiteside's car, the grandmother, because they had discovered that the Houck family had a white Buick that might fit that description. Well, they got there on the day they were planning to execute the warrant and discovered that the day before, the Houcks, specifically Anna Whiteside's the grandmother and Nick, Brooks' brother, had taken the vehicle down into Louisville and they'd sold it. So they hightailed it down there, grabbed the white vehicle and brought it back for testing and did other sorts of things like that with it. So one of the things they did that just so happened at about the same time, one of the police officers who testified yesterday said that he was at the fair and he saw a dog show and he saw somebody with either a t-shirt or maybe the dog was wearing something that said cadaver dog. Well, that's really specific. We could use a cadaver dog. So he took the dog and the trainer, picked them up, talked to him, convinced him to do it, and picked him up the next day. And the dog and the trainer, he took them to the lot where Anna Whiteside's car was being kept. It had only been there a brief period of time, I think maybe a couple of weeks. And there were a number of cars on the lot. I think they came up with 10, 12, somewhere in that number. And the dog had been trained, and the way the handler explained, initially he trained the dog for a live find. In other words, when you go out looking for a missing person, you're hoping, usually anyway, that you find them alive. And so the dog will alert to that. And the dog does that by putting its nose against the person. And you know the person's alive, and the dog is alerted to that. Now, if it's not a live person, and if they find human remains, the dog is supposed to sit and and that's the alert. The dog sits. So this particular dog had been trained for both live find and also human remains. And he said, this is sort of a weird comment. He said he enjoyed training for human remains, asked for training for human remains. Like, I'm sure that's a good thing from the dog's perspective. It did sound a little weird. He said, one of the questions the prosecution asked him was, well, what about if they're kind of old? What if it's a year after the person? And he said, well, actually, some dogs can work cases that are hundreds of years old, which is insane to me. That he said, for example, they looked for Catholic churches that killed and buried children. It's like, apparently in Canada. I was like, oh my gosh, what happened there? I don't know anything about that. I'm simply reporting, okay? And then also Indian graveyards. Civil War soldier said scent can remain a really long time, and some dogs have the capability of finding that. So he asked Detective Brooks not to tell him anything. He said, I want to go in blind. I will not know what you want me to look for. He didn't know that he was supposed to look at the cars. There was a building there. He didn't know what he was supposed to do. That way the dog would be best able to figure it out without any sort of preconceived pushing or anything that would sort of direct him one particular way. So he was given no information about anything other than that he was supposed to be doing human remains detection. So Ranger cleared the area of live victims, which obviously there weren't any at that place. And then he narrowed his search to the back of two vehicles, a red Chevy sitting next to a white Buick LeSabre. And he figured later that the scent must have been blowing because they were parked directly next to each other up against a fence with the rear of both vehicles up against the fence. And he figured that was probably the scent blowing toward the red Chevy because ultimately the dog picked the white Buick and then he went up to the passenger mirror and then back to the rear, and he alerted for right there at the rear corner of the vehicle, right at the trunk area where the passenger side would hit the trunk area. Right there is where he alerted. And obviously, one of the deep concerns for everyone, including law enforcement, is that that's because Crystal Rogers' body was in that trunk at some point. They were not able to find any evidence of that. They did find one hair that on microscopic evaluation could be consistent with Crystal's, but there wasn't enough to test it for DNA. It just wasn't possible to do that. They could tell it wasn't Anna's hair, but they couldn't tell that it was Crystal's hair, only that it was consistent microscopically with it. So on cross-examination, it was kind of the blame the dog testimony or cross-examination. At first they said, well, this is just like, this wasn't even your full-time job at the time. You just did this part-time and this is just volunteer. It's, sort of saying the organization isn't really all that great. And then they sort of went after the dog. And there was one other, the lawyer said, I want to make sure we're looking, you mentioned your report. I want to make sure we're looking at the same thing, this 2-page thing. And the witness says, yes, 2 pages with pictures attached. I'll tell you what that was kind of a subtle dig, like, you call this a report? It's only 2 pages. That's what the lawyer meant, in my opinion. So Ranger was certified in human remains detection back in 2015, but the records of all of his training and everything were lost, apparently in a move. The trainer moved from one location to another, and in the course of that, the movers managed to lose Ranger's records along with another dog's records, and that's a pretty catastrophically big problem for them. All of the documentation about training, about even his certification, everything was lost. So that obviously cast some doubt on him, but he was certified as human remains detection. And but he was certified only 1 year before, and there were no records to support it. So that was sort of the means of cutting down the finding of the dog. The report, he also talked about the fact that the report said that they worked the passenger side and mirror and gave a full alert, which made it sound, I imagine, to the defense like the alert was at the mirror. But according to him, the alert was at the truck. But they didn't, unfortunately, take a photo of the dog alerting. They didn't take any video of him going around the car and reaching his conclusion and alerting on the back. So that part was a shame that they didn't have that. But we did have the testimony of both the officer and of the trainer or handler saying exactly what it was, where it was that he alerted. So the defense also tried to suggest, well, maybe a lot of this was sort of undermined by the fact that so many people were in and around this trunk. They went in there and they pulled out hairs, and then they literally pulled out the carpet and put that separately, and then they put it back in. So there were a lot of people in and around examining this trunk. But he said that really shouldn't make a difference. The dog would alert on the human remains detection, nothing else. So next witness 34 by my count, I'm not totally sure on that, Joshua Hickman, another expert from Celebrite, for those of you who were either following the Alec Murdaugh or the Karen Reed trial more recently. This was an expert from Celebrite, and what he said was so interesting. And here I want to talk about a little something that wasn't discussed at trial it's really bugging me. I think maybe they missed something, at least they haven't talked about it yet, put it that way. So here's what they did was they went through Crystal Rogers' phone and looked at what the activity was. The primary point they were making was that the last time it was doing something on a regular basis, doing something Crystal probably would have done, was at 9:23 at night. So that really doesn't make sense with what Brooks Houck claims, which is that they were out at the property walking around until roughly 12. They came back. He went to bed, as the video suggests, about 12:30. And he said several times that Crystal was up playing games on her phone with Eli running around the house when he went to bed. He woke up in the morning. She was gone. He had no idea what had happened. He assumed maybe she had gone out to, maybe she was upset with him. Maybe she had gone out to either her cousin's house or her parents' house. So that's what he thought was happening. He didn't know where she was or why exactly she wasn't in the bed with him. So it's important then, if the phone ends at 9:23 and there's no activity in it, and she's supposedly sitting on the couch on her phone playing games, that's not possible. So that's a real hole in Brooks Houck's story. There are a bunch of things around this that I want to talk about, but let's focus for just this minute on what this expert from Celebrite said in his report about this. So they went through what exactly was going on Crystal's phone. And pretty much she was playing the cookie jam game. And she was doing that. And, it would get interrupted a lot. I'm sure Eli's running around bothering her, going crazy. And so she'd do a little bit. And she got on the Facebook app. And then she played cookie jam some more. Then she probably lost all her lives in that. I don't know that game particularly, but that's how it is for me anyway. And she moved on to the Sugar Smash app. Sugar Smash Book of Life. Why is that hard for me to say? App. And she did that a couple of times. And then, so all of that went on from 7:39 until 9:23, at which point her phone shut off almost certainly because it lost power, just ran out of battery. So at 11:57, the device began to boot, meaning I guess that someone had charged it, right? And then the messaging app showed as in use. All that meant, though, he explained, was that had been up and now it's front and center. It doesn't mean anyone actually does anything with that. And then some GPS coordinates pop up in something called Retail Me or Retail Me Not. I had a hard time hearing that part. I'm not familiar with that. And then he said, you can't really count on those coordinates because it was so fast. And then it was powered off. The booting was completed and it was powered off. And so you can't count on that. It wasn't accurate in terms of where exactly this location was. All right. So the timing of this booting up, message app pops up, GPS coordinates start to come in, booting finishes, and manually shut down, manually by hand, in other words, shut down. All of that happened in 30 seconds. So it started at 11:57:09. All of that was done by 11:57:39, and that was it. It was manually powered down, and there was no more activity until the police got hold of the phone, and on July 6th, booted it up again and looked at it in order to investigate what had happened to Crystal Rogers. So all of that happened in just 30 seconds. It wasn't like real use of the phone. So it certainly wouldn't jibe with her sitting on the couch, working on what she was doing with this game. She wasn't gaming during this period of time. She wasn't playing her game. But I also wanted to, I wanted to point out something that really didn't make sense with this. Remember that supposedly Crystal Rogers told several different witnesses that she was, that very night, her boyfriend Brooks had invited her on a special date night. They had a babysitter for every single one of the 5 children. Eli was the one she shared with Brooks, but she had 4 others as well. And they had babysitters for everybody, and they were going on a special date night. None of that made sense, because what they did was go to the family farm of the Houcks, walk around on a rainy night in the mud, feed the pigs, and just walk around for 4 solid hours. And they had Eli with them. So none of that really made sense. It didn't really look like a date night. But also, that date night supposedly happened from 7:30 when they started out for the Houck farm, a little bit before that, till about 12:30 when they get back home. So that's the period of time. And it takes 15 minutes maybe to get to their house from the farm. So till midnight. So say 8 to 12, they were out at the farm. So she's playing this cookie jam game app from 7:39 on and off, and then Sugar Smash on and off until 9:23. That would be when she's supposedly walking around the farm in the rain. Well, you don't usually have your phone out, A, when you're walking around, or B, when it's raining, right? Because that just isn't what you do, because your phone is likely to get damaged. So that doesn't make sense to me. I can see maybe she's sitting in the car at right there until 9:23 or maybe a little later, but why is she gaming while walking around? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit with Brooke's story, but they didn't talk about that. What they focused on was how it contradicts Brooke's story related to late at night when he goes to bed and he says she's playing the game. Remember, in opening, we were told Brooks did not actually say she was playing the game. What Brooks actually said was that she often played the game. She usually played the game. She played the game right before we went to bed. But we've heard at least 3 times now, twice with Nancy Grace, once with another interview that he did, and once, I would say, also with the interview he did with the police. We've heard that he was pretty specific, saying that she was on her phone, that she was playing games. So I think that argument they made in opening didn't really carry out in face of the evidence that the prosecution presented. All right, so we will, it appeared when it came to cross that the location data must have been kind of important. The one, remember, on that Retail Me Not that came in, or it could be Retail Me, that came in and the location data started to come in. Apparently that would have been pretty bad for the defense. We didn't hear what it was because the witness said, yeah, that's not really reliable. It's too big a range. It isn't pinpointing it yet. So, but immediately when when they got up for cross, the Houck lawyer said, well, let me check one thing first, because I could eliminate a lot of my questions. Or you're saying you can't rely on the location data? And he said, yes, that's right. And so there wasn't really a ton of cross-examination on this that really got anywhere. But what really interested me, one of the jurors, I think he's the one who's been asking most of the questions. I finally figured out which one it was. Each time I've been like, oh, dang, I missed who sent that question in. But I saw it this time. He pulled it off the page and sent it in. And they take it up to the bench. And all the lawyers go up to the judge. They're playing the noise in the background. And, we're waiting. And I see the judge going like this. I see them all shaking. I'm like, okay, they're going to say no on this question. And I said, I know what the question is then. I bet you anything the question was exactly what my question was, which is, what was that inaccurate location? Just go ahead and tell me, and I'll decide whether I think it was all that accurate or not. But they didn't do that because obviously if it was inaccurate, it wasn't really something that could be presented as evidence at trial. But I couldn't blame the guy for asking what I bet he was going to ask. That was just my theory. All right, so they started to put up Detective James as a witness. He takes a stand, and then the prosecutor says, apologies, I need to call another witness. So we went with Lon Spalding of Thompson Hill Road, witness 36, roughly, and he owns a family property that adjoins the Thompson property. And you're like, wait, what about the Houck property? No, this is something entirely different up north of Bardstown. We heard a lot about Steve Lawson going up to Thompson Hill Road. And I believe they said that Steve lives up that way. But Thompson Hill Road, apparently there are some big farming tracts. On one side of the road, I'll show you my beautiful rendering. We have a good rendering to show you in a minute. There we go. Okay, so 75 acres for Dad David Thompson, and across the street, like 42 acres, I think they said, for 4.2 acres for Jeremy Thompson. And then adjoining that was the property of this guy, Lon Spalding. So on the night, well, first of all, he said that across the street, Daddy Thompson, there's a lot of garbage buried there, that people brought over multiple loads of trash in trucks. And by now it's been buried and burned, so it's not visible. But the question was asked by the prosecutor, so was he running an illegal dump? And he said, in my opinion, yes. So on July 3rd and 4th, 2015, this is the day that Crystal disappears. And the next day she's never seen again. She's last seen on the 3rd. Somebody was at not Daddy Thompson's property, but Jeremy's property across the street, digging and burying and burning. They'd already been doing that on David Thompson's side, but suddenly this weekend, the witness says it's on his side of the road near his property line, which I have got to figure would make you furious. And it was in the nighttime, early morning range, and they were digging a hole and burning items, a 10-foot square hole, he said. And they used a bulldozer. It was actually a high lift, they said, which is like a bulldozer, but has a bucket that lifts high to put stuff in a truck, in case you were wondering. And 2 weeks later, they took that high lift and they moved it back over to the other side of the road. So on cross-examination, the defense pointed out something pretty important, which is that police actively searched that area. They did a 3-day search with lots of officers. They used heavy equipment. They used vehicles. They used tents. They had drones. And the witness said he's not aware of anything being found. And we do know that I think the community was informed that nothing was found, or at least they certainly weren't informed if something was found, put it that way. Next witness, Kim Edlin. And I want to show you this. I have a video to show you here too. I don't want to forget that, and actually I have a picture to show you too. All right, we'll do both of those. Let me tell you what Kim said first. So she lives next to the house. Another beautiful drawing, hand drawing. Yes, there we go. Kim, why can't I do that? Okay, so 345, I think it is. Pascal Ballard is the address of the house. Kim Edlin, that property above the house. So there were questions, and frankly, this was all a little mystifying. I think there's some argument that is going to relate to something the defense says. That's all I can figure. But she was asked, you had Wi-Fi, but no extender outside your home. So she said that what she had done, they had to, and the cross actually explained a lot more about this than the prosecution did. That's happened several times from like, what are they talking about? And then the defense will come in and ask questions that kind of explain what this was about. So bottom line is, prior to 2015, they had dial-up internet. They decide they're going to install a pole. It costs them $1,500 to put in this satellite dish and Wi-Fi. And the FBI in her interview said they noticed a booster connected to the pole. And she is the one in charge for the family of doing this. And she said she would know if she was paying for a router and a booster. As far as she knows, she's only paying for a router, not a booster. So what does that mean? I don't know. I guess, was there some booster put on there and that has something to do with this? I don't know. None of that made any sense. I'll just tell you what I heard. Witness 38, Jamie Brooks, talked about, he went through some of the video clips. Most of these are, in my opinion, pretty incomprehensible to people in the audience. That's my opinion. I don't know whether the jury could hear or not. They talked about, we know a little bit about it. There was some discussion. These are all recordings that Brooks Houck or Houck family members made. They were found in little recorders in a jeans pocket in Rosemary Houck's home, in her closet, or in a dresser inside a bag that had bingo stamps, which somebody informed me, thank you, that is what you stamp the card with, I guess, to see if you won, or maybe, I don't know. I thought I understood this. I'm not really sure what bingo stamps are, but it was something that stamps a bingo card. There you go. All right. So, but there were things like, they talked about a blanket. We were told in opening statements that they were discussing this blanket and worried about whether there was a hair on a blanket in Nick's patrol car, which had just been seized. Nick, of course, being the brother of Brooks Houck. They apparently talked about tinted windows on Brooks Houck's truck. And they especially talked about, or one of the things he played today, they recorded some of the grand jury proceedings. Now, grand jury proceedings are supposed to be ultra secret. Those are not something that's shared with anybody outside the grand jury, but they were recorded. And what happened was the Houcks hit the button to record before they went in. And so you hear a conversation between Rhonda McElvoy, who is the sister of Brooks Houck, and Brooks talking about, okay, let's get this on. I'm going to turn this on for you, blah, blah, blah. And it's before the grand jury. So they at no point played the grand jury testimony, I guess, because it is confidential. But what they did play was the lead up to it, including discussions between Brooks and his attorneys, who are not the same attorneys he presently has. So I think for all of these, a lot of courts would allow the prosecution to either have an enhanced audio or would allow them to maybe have a transcript. A lot of courts allow the witness to say what the witness is hearing. This court did not. I actually think that's probably the correct ruling legally, because it sure would be easy to say, and what do you hear, trooper, on that? What did you hear him say about the tinted windows in Brooks's truck? And maybe he would say something, right? But technically that really isn't appropriate. He started to ask a question like that, the prosecution did, and there was an objection, and they all went up front. And I feel certain that what the defense was saying was, you can't do that, Judge. You can't. The audio tape speaks for itself. The jury hears what the jury hears. You can't tell the jury what you hear in hopes they'll hear the same thing. And I think that's probably the correct ruling, but a lot of courts think Donna Adelson, and in the Delphi case, they let the prosecution use an enhanced video of the Delphi Bridge. So, and we did hear something pretty funny where I think somebody is talking about the 5 answers that you're allowed to give to a grand jury. More advice a lawyer would give to protect a client. And I only heard 3. I imagine yes and no were the other 2, but I don't know. My guess is as good as yours, and we're all extremely upset. So there you go. There's the advice he received. the cross-examination pointed out that Rhonda McElvoy and Brooks Houck can be heard on the audio tapes saying, with Rhonda saying, what do I say? And then there's a cutoff moment. And then Brooks Houck says something about, you tell them there's nothing in there or nothing to it because it's the truth. After lunch, next witness, Rebecca Greer, she's a truck driver by trade, and Joey Lawson is her former stepson, meaning she was married to Steve Lawson. Now, Joey was an adult. It wasn't like she raised him or anything, but he was younger, and she was married to Steve Lawson in 2022. They first got together in 2017, were together through 2019. They broke up for a year, and then they got back together like October of 21, and then they got married. They're now divorced. So ironically, during this same period, after she got together with Steve, Joey Lawson had a relationship with her daughter, and they had a child named Chloe, a little girl. Now, both Joey and the daughter, whose name I don't recall, had issues. Oh, Elizabeth. I think it's Elizabeth. Joey and Elizabeth both had issues with substance abuse, and they broke up. And for a while, they weren't allowed to be around the child. Rebecca kept the child for a while. And then in 2019, they off and on, at least twice, Joey and Elizabeth lived with her, and especially after they had the baby. So in one of these occasions, she overheard a conversation between Joey and Elizabeth in which, and I wrote at this moment, she is so credible. I don't think they will have pressure evidence on her. And they did not. They did not. So, and by pressure evidence, I mean the evidence we've heard from other witnesses about all this pressure being placed on them, like, we're going to do this or that to you. We're going to put you in jail if you don't say. And one of the arguments for the defense is they were insisting on certain answers or they would not be satisfied. So, but in any event, Joey Lawson was moving a car. So I think what I say all that to say, I think the jury is likely to believe a lot of what she said, as opposed to what I said about some of the witnesses yesterday and the day before. And I'm concerned that the jury may think of them as not all that credible because of the pressure that was put on them. So I don't think there was pressure on her. All right. So Joey Lawson was saying that he was moving, that he had moved a car and was paid $50,000, and it don't need to be brought up. So, and she overhears this. She doesn't really know what it's about. And Joey Lawson then says there was $50,000 collected for moving a car, but it didn't need to be discussed any further. It was said twice. So I do it both ways so you can kind of hear it from either side. A few months later, she is alone with Joey and she confronts him about this. And he says, yeah, but if you want to know any details, you need to ask Steve. And then on cross-examination, they said, okay, your daughter's a drug addict. Joey's a drug addict. You've had troubles. And she said, well, she'd been sober for 30 years. And the man and the attorney was like, well, if I had known that, I wouldn't have even brought that up. So from 4/13/23, she told the grand jury that Joey Lawson said, more or less, I tried to get the exact quote, couldn't find anyone who got it exactly, but something along the lines of, Joey says stuff just to make himself look good. So he likes to, be a heavyweight. And so you can't really trust what he's saying. She said that to the grand jury is what the defense was saying. Now, after that statement, the defense also pointed out, even though she was supposed to ask Steve about this moving a car and $50,000, she was supposed to ask him about, she married him despite all that. And also, Steve never actually had any money. If he had come into $50,000, then she had to pay for everything. She didn't really know where that money would have gone, although it had been 2 years since Crystal had disappeared. If they got together in 2017, Crystal disappeared in 2015. So on redirect, there were some questions around that money issue, that she had said that Steve had money all the time. The first couple of weeks you knew him, then he was always broke. So I don't know, maybe the money lasted, exactly 2 years or something. But the prosecution also had her get into a fight between Steve and Joey Lawson. And it was a big fight. Apparently, they really got into it. It was full-fledged fighting. They rode down 30 concrete steps, screaming, cussing, and throwing swings, she said. And they were threatening, at least Joey was. And he said, you keep on doing this, acting like this, I'm going to let everyone know about this car and how involved you were. So that was the statement that came in. Obviously, the Commonwealth believes they were talking about their role, or Steve's role, and probably implying about Joey's role in connection with taking the car of Crystal Rogers and leaving it on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. So witness 40, Stacy Cramner, worked for Brooks Houck in insulation. She built decks, and she had known Steve and Joey Lawson, but not until after they all started working for Brooks Houck. I realize I have not been thanking people. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that very much. And I see that was a long time ago, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. Neuropsych Zena, thank you for gifting 10 Lawyerly memberships. If you're not a member, it's just a way of financially supporting the channel, but we have a ton of fun, and you will get to use the cool emojis you see everybody using in the chat. We also have some members-only live streams. You can turn on your ability to receive a gifted membership using the instructions Marlon's going to put in the chat. And then but you can always join by just hitting the join button. Unless you're on your iPhone, sorry for this long explanation. If you're on your iPhone, there's no join button. You have to go in through your browser, or you have to go in just using your computer, your regular computer. All right. So Mildred thinks that the verdict will be exactly 5 years after her disappearance. It might be. It really might be. Says, I pray for her family to get justice. I don't know how quickly it will get done. We start the defense case tomorrow. I've been wondering this, trying to figure out stuff, right? And so if they end up taking a couple of days for the defense, we've only got 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, and then we move into the 4th of July weekend. So I wondered what the judge will do. I'm thinking he would not want to do closing arguments Thursday afternoon, and then the jury, doesn't deliberate, just a little bit of time until they start on Monday again. But I don't know. It's really, he runs a tight ship. I've never seen a court this tightly run. It's really well run. When he says it's a 10-minute break or a 15-minute break, he means 15 or less. They may start before that. If he says it's an hour for lunch, it is. I mean, he runs it absolutely clockwork. There's none of this, it's 2 o'clock, time for a half day here, we're taking tomorrow off. None of that. It is nonstop. This is the trial. You're here from 8:30 until 5. So I have been wondering about that, Mildred. Thank you for your super chat. And it may well be, if it happens on Thursday, that will be 10 years to the day since she disappeared, which is just absolutely crazy to think about. It really could be. It's going to be awfully close. Idiot Win, what a nice comment. Thank you. And I really appreciate the super chat as well. Thank you. All right, well, let's keep going through what Stacy says. Now, I would like to say that there were a couple of complaints today from the jury about how hard it is to hear. I would say this is way better than some courtrooms, but it is still very difficult to hear. The witnesses are a long way from the jury or from where we are in the audience sitting in the jury, in the courtroom. But anyway, I was talking about Stacy, who worked for Brooks and had just barely met Steve Lawson and Joey Lawson as part of working for Brooks Houck. And she said that Brooks Houck and Steve Lawson, and when exactly this was, you can take your pick. She sometimes said the day before Crystal disappeared. She sometimes said 3 weeks before, and one time she said a week before. So take your pick. But she said that Brooks Houck and Steve Lawson got in a truck together and drove around kind of in the area. I guess she could keep eyes on them. And they went from various places, and they were in the truck pretty good while, 45 minutes an hour. And they kind of stayed around that neighborhood, just sort of moving around from house to house. They'd stop in front of a house and talk, not getting out, just looking. And she said she was thinking they were talking about her, that she asked if she was in trouble due to a crack in the wood ceiling of a house she and her husband had done the insulation on. And Steve Lawson said, no, that's not even what we're talking about. She thought it was especially unusual because Brooks didn't put any of the workers in the truck with him. That just wasn't something he did. And so it was really weird that Steve got in the truck with him and walked around. So what Steve told her was he and Brooks were talking about a girl that he had to take care of. And the witness says, how are you going to take care of her? And he says, well, she's not doing very well. She has 5 kids, which of course is the exact number that Crystal Rogers has, and not exactly a common number of kids to have. This is Stacy Cramner. And Stacy said that he also said that this woman that he was going to have to take care of was on drugs and meth. And so Stacy said, oh, are you going to put her in rehab? And he said, I wish that was the case. And the prosecution said, well, what was his demeanor as he was saying all this? And she said, bragging, which the prosecutor kind of reacted to that. I don't think he was expecting that answer. She said she didn't report it to police because she was afraid they would do to her what they did do to Crystal. But Sunday, as soon as Crystal Lawson went missing, she called and left a message with the police. And we were actually, they introduced into evidence a call log showing that she called on July 5th at 6:43 p.m. And then nobody called her. So she calls, leaves this message, nobody calls her back. Then on the October of 2015, she went back to the police and she said, I've been talking to Steve Lawson about a girl I have to take care of. She's on meth, their children, 5 kids, etc. This is cross-examination now. And so she tells them that, and they laugh at her. And they say, Steve Lawson, he tells all kinds of stuff. He's full of crap. And so she said, well, when she wrote all this down, she didn't write in all the detail because they were just laughing at her anyway. But importantly, she did not say had never heard of any reference to Crystal being on meth. We've had one witness who said that to the police, but apparently, that wasn't particularly credible, and no one really seems to believe that Crystal was a drug user or used meth. So in 2023, she talked to the Kentucky State Police, and she said that all of this happened on 3 weeks before Crystal went missing. So that was, she said 3 different dates depending on when she was asked. It was always before Crystal disappeared, but it could have been as far as, 3 weeks before. All right. So the FBI wanted her then to talk to Steve Lawson and to wear a wire. Apparently she did, and she asked him about this conversation. It didn't get played if that's the case. But what Steve told her was, I didn't say I'd take care of her, but I'd take care of business. I probably meant Red. And Red was apparently an ex-girlfriend of Joey, I guess, who was known as a meth user. She didn't tell him she was wearing a wire, and he said this like, oh, no, you misunderstood me. In other words, without knowing he was being recorded, he nonetheless was saying, no, you got it wrong. And so in 2019, in her statement, she said all of this happened the week before Crystal went missing. So there was a lot of uncertainty, frankly, around the time. Polio, thank you for the super sticker. Much appreciated. And Kimberly is a brand new member. We are glad to have you. And Jay Lookout is asking me a question. I'll save that for the question time. Thank you for the super chat, and I'll come back to that. All right. Barbara Coulter was the next witness. She is the mother of Steve Lawson and the grandmother of Joey Lawson, the defendant. Now, Steve already convicted in a prior trial, and the jury recommended a sentence of 17 years. He hasn't been sentenced yet. The grandmother of Joey, I understand this, Barbara Coulter, testified at Steve's trial and was very effective. So she also came to this trial. She is not the mother, but the grandmother of Joey. And she told of this, that in the summer of 2022, Joey is now paralyzed from a motorcycle wreck, but at the time he was not yet paralyzed. And he rode to her house on a motorcycle, and he was very high, too high to be driving a motorcycle, she said. And he said that she needed to know that Stephen had killed Crystal. In other words, Stephen Lawson, her son, had killed Crystal Rogers. And then there was the judge gave an instruction to the jury that's only to be used against Joey Lawson, not against Brooks Houck. And I think that's because a statement of a conspirator can come in at trial. So it's something that you said in the course of the conspiracy or in furtherance of it. Different people who said things, all of those statements come in. So if Brooks is talking to Steve about the conspiracy, but Joey's part of it, everything Brooks says could come in against Joey. But in this case, this is no longer the conspiracy. This is years later. So I think that's why it could be used against Joey, but not against Brooks. So the mother of Steve, grandmother of Joey, said that Stephen and Joey struggled with alcohol, and Joey especially struggled with drugs. They had a toxic relationship, ran their mouth all the time when they were doing drink or drugs, and that Joey was very high when he said this. And she told him, if you're going to say stuff like this, you need to know this is fact. For the wrong person, it could become a fact, and it can create a whole lot of drama. And she said he gave zero details. She told the police about it, and here she was at trial. Next witness, Brooks Witchert, CPA. And here's what he said. He said, Brooks in 2015, before Crystal disappeared, Brooks was introduced to him by another client of his. And apparently Rosemary Houck, he said, was doing the books. And they talked about now maybe Brooks Witchert would do the books and what would be involved. He talked about bookkeeping, talked about tax, and made a tentative appointment for later. And this was right about a week before Crystal Rogers disappeared. I was thinking to myself, why is this important? When the woman sitting next to me pokes me, Connie says, why is that important? Like, I don't know. I have no idea. Why did we just hear about that? I mean, obviously the Commonwealth plans to use it somehow. They bothered to put him in. And at that time, they rested. That is the end of the Commonwealth's case. From here on out, it's the defense bringing the case. Now, here is what happened after this. We had a directed verdict motion. That's something where right after the presentation of the entire prosecution, the defense comes in and says, you see what they produce? That's not enough. That doesn't meet the elements of a legal claim for murder, for conspiracy. It's not enough. And they asked the judge to dismiss it. Very, very rare that would be dismissed. And there was, I thought, zero chance of that happening here. And there, in fact, was no chance of it happening here. It did not happen. Give you just the super brief rundown of what they argued. The defense said, look, legally, you need one of these three things: a body, a confession, or a crime scene. You've got nothing. No body, no crime scene, no confession. So that you don't have enough in this particular case. And the Commonwealth said there was a witness to this. Brooks Houck himself was a witness, and he lied. He lied about all the things that he did that night and the next day. And there's a reason that he did that. Says he went to the Houck farm all day on the 3rd. Why? Or he did go to the Houck farm all day. Why didn't he tell us that? Why would he hide that? What's the reason for that? And He and his brother went, and his brother dropped off all contact with anybody for 24 hours, didn't even show up at home at night, while with it said, I'm going to be with Brooks, and then was totally incommunicado for 24 hours leading up to the period and across the period when Crystal Rogers disappeared. So the judge, on this, in response, the judge gave his ruling orally right there from the bench. And he said, I must view everything in the light most favorable to the Commonwealth. That's the legal standard for a directed verdict, meaning I've got to look at everything and assume the jury decides with the Commonwealth. Looking at it from that point of view, would it be enough? And not, maybe the jury won't buy some of this, but just if they did, would it be enough? And I mean, he went on for 15 minutes, and then there was this, and there were 2 coon hunters saw the white Buick, and then Tommy Ballard posted on Facebook, and 4 days later, they're trying to sell the white Buick, and Ranger detected human remains, and there was a hair in the trunk, and he just went on and on and on about all of these things that, I mean, he just summarized all the evidence. It was this, obviously, and let me make this clear. You might not know this. I guess I should say this. The jury isn't there. The jury is gone. He sent the jury home for the day. This is just a legal argument before the court. That's all it is. So we were allowed to hear that in the courtroom, but the jury didn't hear any of this. But it's a lot like a closing argument because he just listed all of the pieces of evidence. Now, I do want to mention something. There have been reports about, and I assume this to be true, it came from a very credible source, that yesterday Charlie Girdle said, Charlie Girdle was a witness. He was a Brooks Houck employee. And then he said, Joey Lawson said to him that what he planned to do with Crystal was he would pull her teeth and let the hogs do the rest. That is horrifying. I will say this. I didn't hear that. Only one outlet reported it, and then another at least picked it up. Court TV picked that up. But the outlet that reported it is very reliable. This witness was super hard to hear. He mumbled a lot, and I assumed that they are correct about that. However, today in the directed verdict argument, the prosecution went even further and said that what he had said was that he was going to shave her hair and the teeth and pull the teeth and then the hogs. Well, I mean, it's hard even repeating that. That's like so awful. But I don't know, since the outlet didn't report that, I'm not sure that was said at this trial. It may have been said elsewhere, or they may have had private information about that. But I just mentioned that because I want to be transparent with you that I didn't hear that. You see the notes that I'm taking, they're as detailed as I can get, but no one person can catch absolutely everything. And it is hard to hear. And that witness was particularly hard to understand. So I just repeat that for you so you can do with it as you will. What the jury heard is obviously the most important part, although also the transcript should reflect that when the case is over. Let's see. Now, what else do I need to tell you about? I do want to show you this one. This is so cool. So a friend of mine, let me add this to the stage. Yep, that's the one. This is a friend of mine, Christina, did this drawing for us. It is so good. This is kind of a picture of what the courtroom is like. Remember how I kept saying Joey Lawson is like an afterthought? I mean, he is like in the corner. This is a pretty good depiction of what the first day was like, with Joey Lawson literally like shoulder to the door. That's a door right behind him. And, you know, he's all the way on the wall in his wheelchair. And all these lawyers all around the table. And then Brooks Houck is the one in kind of the gray shirt. Everybody else is wearing a suit, but not Brooks. He just has a shirt on. And there's a woman right next to Brooks. I think after watching the trial a little bit, she does the exhibits for the defense. I think she has some kind of role with IT. And then right behind Brooks is another woman. I don't know if she's an attorney. She may be an attorney. She does a lot with the exhibits as well. Some jurisdictions let you have a paralegal it's called before the bar, in front of the bar. Some don't. In case you ever wondered, the reason why you're admitted to the bar, that wooden railing that they have between the people sitting to watch the trial and everything, the witness and the judge and the lawyers, that's called the bar. So when you're admitted to the bar, you're literally allowed to go into the area where the attorneys and the witness and the judge are. So in a lot of places, the paralegals need to sit behind the bar and then hand stuff over as you're working. So I don't know at her exact role. All right, let's see. Was there anything else that I need to tell you? The judge also ruled on a couple of motions. I don't think there were any surprises there. Oh, of course, we need to get to the Joey also made a directed verdict motion, just like Brooks Houck had made. What he argued was there has to be an agreement. Let me pull that. Oh, well, while I've got this up, let me add a few more things about this. So actually there now are two tables and a side table. I don't know if I missed that at first, but they kind of moved. One lawyer is slightly, I wonder if you can see my marker. One lawyer is slightly further over than Joey now. So he's kind of second, but there's yet another lawyer in there. So there are a ton of people between the jury and Joey. He is all the way back in the corner. He is almost like an afterthought. It's very strange because he is looking at facing 25 years in prison if he gets maximum sentences. I mean, this could happen. And yet he's like way back in the corner and just not really front and center in this trial, even though it matters so much. So his lawyer moved for a directed verdict and said, one of the things he argued was, look, there's supposed to be an agreement, but in order for it to be a conspiracy, but what are they agreeing to do exactly? I mean, does he even know Crystal's going to be killed, or does he just know that he's supposed to move her car and there's something sketchy about it that amounts to $50,000 worth of moving a car? And he said, so what's the conspiracy? This isn't really defined here. And he said, he's also accused of tampering with evidence, but was there a body to destroy because no body was found? And was there a car to destroy because the car hadn't been tampered with? It had a flat tire, but it had been leaking air for quite some time. She'd been filling it up. So where's the physical evidence that was tampered with? And the court just took that pretty quickly, said, look, he's made statements about moving the car, about taking $50,000 for it or being offered that. He made these horrendous comments about the teeth. And the court said, and her hair. No, that was the Commonwealth. Sorry, that was the Commonwealth. So here's what the court said. Sorry, that was the Commonwealth argument. Please don't get that mixed up. Okay, so here's what the court said. Look, Heather Snelling came in and said they discussed moving the body with the skid steer. Greer came in and said they had a conversation about this $50,000 with the daughter, and that Joey then had a fight while going down the stairs with Steve and was saying, I'm going to let everyone know about the car. And then Grigg said something about he got the car keys from Brooks Houck's that night. So all of that, the court said, that's enough to go to the jury. And I think it's clearly enough to go to the jury. Would it be enough to support the verdict? We will find out, and not too long from now. So I will take just a few questions. Oh my goodness, there are a lot of people I need to thank. Jay Lookout asked me a question. Now that the Commonwealth is rested, do you think they made a fatal mistake by not calling Steve since he admitted to moving Crystal Rogers' car with Joey? And why do you think they chose not to call him? I have wondered so much about the whole machinations behind the scene about why exactly the trials were split, why exactly Joey and Brooks ended up in one trial and Steve ended up in another, and it was critically important to do Steve first. I don't fully understand that, but that's because the briefs got filed. So many briefs got filed under seal, and I was on the list to get the documents, but all that would come in is sealed. And so you had no idea what the arguments were or why. I do not know why they split those up or what exactly the arguments were about what testimony he would give or could give. I feel like it probably would have been wise to bring him. I feel like he would have waived his right to assert the Fifth Amendment by because he took the stand at his own trial. I don't see that he has the right to claim that anymore. But I wish I had a lot more context around that. I can maybe answer the question a little better. I think that was obviously very powerful if he admitted that. I don't know. Maybe they even had a deal with him that they wouldn't ask him to testify against his son. And see, that's the kind of thing that you just can't know. It's a great question, Jay Lookout, and I wish I had an answer for you. And Freed is thanking me for covering the case. I'm glad you're enjoying it, and has been a member for 16 months. That's awesome. Awesome. And so has Annie K. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. I'm really glad. Gypsy Lee, I guess because I am traveling the world here for these cases. I guess I am at that. Thank you, Annie K. And Jackie P has gifted 5 Lawyer Lee memberships. Jackie P, a huge gifter of Lawyer Lee memberships, and I really do appreciate it, Jackie. Thank you. And F. Reed is hoping the queen size bed is coming. Oh, that's funny. Queen size bed. I like that. Very good. And I heard there were a lot of jokes last night about deep dive. That's pretty funny. All right. So, all right. Let's see. I've got to move backwards a little bit. I probably missed a bunch of questions. I hate to. I'll just start where I am. I might have missed a few, but what happened to Joey? Lat G. Morgan says, yes, a motorcycle wreck is what we were told today at the trial, which is exactly what happened to my George. All right. Let's see. I'm looking for question marks at the beginning, which is my best shot of finding it. What's your thoughts on the jurors? Carrie asked. First of all, today was the first time when I thought I saw some jurors maybe sleeping. They were, playing like some kind of boring video. It was a little bit slow, so I could kind of understand about that. For the most part, they've been very attentive, paying a lot of close attention. A little bit of notes. There's no great note taker like, someone who is like frantically writing everything, but they do take a lot of notes. And so, or take some notes. I'll put it that way. Some notes. I think they will they have paid very close attention to the case. So I think we will find out what they think. And I think, I don't know, they seem like a good set, fairly cohesive. They don't talk to each other all that much. When we see them, they just file in. But that's kind of my basic impression. All right. No, they're not deliberating yet. The defense still has to present its case. And then, of course, we'll have closing arguments. Do you think putting Joey in the corner was strategic by his attorney, asked Virginia? I don't know. I thought it shouldn't be happening. I mean, he's important in the case. I do get the idea, the strategy of maybe making him an afterthought. I think there's some benefit to that. If he's rarely mentioned and no one's thinking about him, then at the end of the case, you can say, well, what about Joey? Nobody mentions him. You can't possibly convict him. But in this case, there ended up being a lot of really nasty statements supposedly made by Joey. And so I think you might as well have him there where they can see him. That's just my thinking now that it's in retrospect. I don't know that anybody really thought of it. I think Brooks was kind of the leader in his team, and they sat right there because they were going to do most of the questioning. And then, some of the lawyers needed to be able to see stuff. So a couple of them sat there, and then that left Joey off in the corner. And then that left, he had another attorney over here and needed more room. And so it just ended up being there was barely enough room for the attorneys as it is, and he was way in the corner. I really appreciated this drawing from Christina because I thought that was such an important point, and I thought it was really cool that she did that for us. That was just really, really nice. She's such a good artist. I thought that is really awesome. She did that all just from my description. You may have seen my little hand drawing, which looked nothing remotely like this. I don't know how this appeared from my hand drawing, but anyway, it was really well done. And I thought it was awfully nice for her to do that for us. It was such an important point. And it kind of gives you an idea of how many lawyers there are. And you can even add one more to that. There's one more than that, I think, because somebody late in the game came in maybe like day 2 or 3. So it's just a lot of lawyers up there. And then poor Joey. He's one over now, one closer, but he's still way back in the corner. So thank you again, Christina. I really appreciated your doing that. All right. So what's your overall feeling? Some nobody says, well, I try really hard not to express any opinions until we get to the end, just because I want people to feel comfortable coming to the channel and hearing what happened. I try to give you my honest take on what I think about what happened during the day. So I can tell you it was a very strong day for the Commonwealth. I think it was just unlike the other days. There weren't these huge negatives about these witnesses. The cross-examinations weren't very concerning about whether or not the Kentucky State Police had gone too far. I thought it was just a great day for the Commonwealth. Very strong. All right. Looking for question marks at the beginning. What's the video? Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay. So Vicky, one of our subscribers, went to Pascal Ballard Road. And so she took a video so you can see this is the it's really almost more of a driveway. It's just a road, one lane that goes to two houses, nowhere else. One of those houses or farms is the Brooks Houck farm. The other one is the witness we heard from that we talked about earlier. So here is her video. Oh, wait, I have to remove that and add that. There we go. So this is Pascal Ballard Road. I thought it was so cool. She went and did this for us this weekend so we could take a look at what exactly it all looks like out there. And she pointed out, it's pretty isolated. There's no one around and there aren't a lot of houses or anything. It's just very much a back road, just two houses on it. That's all it is. A lot of farmland, a lot of land. They do have cows. Interestingly, at no point did they either side ask any witness about whether they had pigs or hogs. I mean, did they? We didn't hear anything about it. We heard they had cows. That's all we heard. As far as I can recall, we didn't hear. The prosecution would have asked, you would think, if they had them. And then on the other hand, the defense would have asked if they didn't. So it's odd that we heard nothing about that at all. All right, let me remove that. And thank you, Vicky. I really appreciated her taking that video so we could sort of feel and see exactly what was going on there. Let me head over here and make sure I'm not missing any. Thank you, Sycamore Sally. I appreciate that. I could not agree more. I think it's been long in the coming, some kind of justice for Crystal. I hope that we are able to get justice. I am very much trying not to express an opinion about the case. I've said that, but obviously justice is the goal. 100%. I agree with that. And thank you, Sky Goddess. Papa Lee is doing well. Thank you for asking. I think he's a little lonesome, and it is, we're missing our TV time at 9 and stuff like that. So anyway, all right. So let's see, what were some of the jury questions, please? The only one today was the one that he wouldn't ask. And that probably chilled this poor guy, who I think is the one who's been asking most, not all, but most of the questions. And so that I suspected what he was going to ask. You can go back a little bit and read about or hear about what I said about that. That is a good question. White asks, are you staying for the full trial or are you headed back now that the state is rested? I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do. I'm definitely here for a couple more days. I'm going to be here for a while. I don't know what I'm going to do, following the weekend. So let me know if you have strong opinions. If you really want coverage, let me know all that. I'd be curious. All right. Well, I will see you all. I've been doing lunch lives in case to give you just a little bit about what happens during the morning. It's really quick, but just to kind of keep it up to date and keep the case moving for you. And then every night at roughly 7 p.m. Central Time, I go live and break down what happened in the case. Tomorrow will be especially interesting because we are going to be hearing from the defense for the first time. We're going to actually be finding out what their positions are, what their case is. We know very little about it, and we will find all of that out beginning tomorrow. So don't forget to tune in tomorrow night at roughly 7 p.m. Central. I'll see you. Thank you, Marlon.